Bridgewater always seemed like a place where nothing bad could happen. This small town, 40 minutes drive from Columbus, lived a measured middle-class life. Neat houses with white picket fences, a local bakery called Mary's Treats, where retirees gathered in the mornings to discuss the news, and a main street lined with small shops that had not yet been swallowed up by chain stores. At the center of this prosperity was the office of Sterling Properties, the most successful real estate agency in the county. Behind the large panoramic windows overlooking Main Street sat a woman who knew the price of every house within a 20-mile radius. Victoria Sterling, at 52, looked 45, thanks to regular visits to a cosmetologist in Columbus and expensive clothes she ordered online from New York boutiques. "Sarah, look at this house on Oak Avenue," Victoria said to her business partner and only close friend, Sarah Mitchell. "The owners are lowering the price for the third time. I think it's worth making an offer on behalf of our investors." Sarah looked up from her computer and adjusted her glasses. At 38, she was 14 years younger than Victoria, but their friendship, which began 10 years ago when Sarah came to work as a real estate agent, had grown into a strong partnership. "Victoria, are you sure? This is the third house in a month. People in town are starting to say that we're buying up everything." Victoria smiled, putting down her coffee cup. "Let them talk. Money doesn't smell, and our profits are growing. Besides, who else is going to sell houses in Bridgewater if not us?" It was true. After her husband's death 5 years ago, Victoria not only kept the family business, but expanded it. James Sterling left her a solid inheritance and connections in the state's business circles, but it was her business acumen that turned a small agency into a real estate empire. A phone call interrupted their conversation. "Sterling Properties. Victoria speaking." "Mrs. Sterling? This is David Chase. Did you leave a request for kitchen renovations at the house on Cherry Lane?" Victoria remembered. 3 weeks ago, she had bought a 1920s Victorian mansion with the intention of renovating and selling it. Local contractors were either too expensive or incompetent, so she decided to try this young builder who had been recommended to her by a neighbor. "Yes, of course. When can you come by for an inspection?" "If it's convenient this afternoon, around 3? Perfect. Do you know the address?" The house on Cherry Lane was located in the old part of Bridgewater, where Victorian mansions stood side by side with colonial houses from the turn of the century. Victoria arrived 5 minutes early, as always punctual in business matters. David Chase showed up at 3 o'clock sharp in a beat-up red Ford pickup truck. Victoria watched from the window as he got out of the car, a tall, athletic man of about 28, wearing work jeans and a plaid shirt. His dark hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and when he turned toward the house, Victoria noticed that he had an attractive face with regular features. "Mrs. Sterling?" David held out his hand for a handshake when she opened the door. "David Chase." His handshake was firm, his hand calloused from work. Victoria felt something flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in several years. "Come in, Mr. Chase. The kitchen is this way, through the living room." For the next half hour, David professionally inspected the premises, took measurements, and wrote notes in a worn notebook. Victoria watched him, pretending to examine other details of the house, but in reality, admiring how deftly he moved, how intently he studied every element of the interior. "The wiring is old and needs to be replaced," he said, looking behind the stove. "The plumbing also needs to be updated. But overall, the house is in good condition. Are you planning a complete renovation or just cosmetic repairs?" "Complete. I want the house to look modern but retain its historical charm." David nodded. "That's reasonable. Houses like this sell well." He closed his notebook. "I can prepare an estimate by the end of the week. The work will take about a month, maybe a little longer if there are any unforeseen problems." "And the cost?" "Approximately $20,000 to $25,000. I'll give you the exact figure in the estimate." Victoria nodded. The price was reasonable. "Mr. Chase, how long have you been doing renovations?" About 6 years. I started right after college. David smiled, and Victoria noticed that he had a beautiful smile. I planned to become an engineer, but I realized that I like working with my hands more. Creating something real. And how are things? Do you have a lot of orders? It varies. Right now it's fine, but winter is always slow. People don't really like to do renovations in the cold. There was a slight note of anxiety in his voice, and Victoria realized that the young contractor's financial situation was not as stable as he was trying to make it seem. "Well, I think we can work together," she said. "Prepare an estimate, and if the numbers suit me, start whenever you're ready." David was clearly delighted. "Great! I'll try to do everything quickly and efficiently." As he was about to leave, Victoria said unexpectedly to herself, "Would you like to have some coffee?" I was just about to go to the cafe on Main Street. David was taken aback for a second, but then smiled. "Why not?" "I have half an hour before my next meeting." The corner cafe was a favorite spot for Bridgewater business people. Seated at neighboring tables were the owner of a local bank with his wife, a school principal, and several merchants from Main Street. Victoria knew them all and exchanged greetings, introducing David as a promising young contractor. "Tell me about yourself," she said as they settled at a table by the window. "Are you from around here?" "Yes, I grew up here. After school, I went to Ohio State to study engineering, but after 2 years, I realized it wasn't for me. I came back home and started working with my hands." "What about your family? Wife, kids?" David shook his head. "Not yet. I had a long relationship in college, but it didn't work out. Since then, I've mostly been working, building my business." Victoria nodded, understanding. After James's death, she too had thrown herself into her work. "Do you have children?" David asked. "No. My husband and I tried for a long time, but it didn't work out." Victoria paused for a second. She rarely talked about it, even with Sarah. "Then he got sick, and we didn't have time for such dreams anymore." "I'm sorry. That must have been hard." "Yes, but life goes on." They sat in the cafe for almost an hour, talking about the city, business, and plans for the future. Victoria discovered that David was not only handsome, but also intelligent and ambitious, although somewhat naive when it came to business. She liked his attention, the way he looked at her, with respect and slight admiration. "I have to go," David finally said, glancing at his watch. "Thanks for the coffee, Mrs. Sterling." "Victoria," she corrected him, "and thank you for the pleasant conversation." After he left, Victoria sat in the cafe for a few more minutes, thinking about the strange feeling he had awakened in her. 5 years of widowhood had accustomed her to loneliness, but now she suddenly felt acutely how much she missed male attention, intimacy, simple human warmth. In the evening, in her large house on Hill Street, the most prestigious street in Bridgewater, Victoria sat in the living room with a glass of expensive wine and thought about her day. The house was too big for one person. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a huge kitchen that she hardly ever used, preferring to order food or eat at restaurants. James had bought this house dreaming of a large family. Now it seemed like a museum of their unfulfilled hopes. The phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Sarah calling. "How did the meeting with the contractor go?" "Fine. I think he'll do the job. Is that all?" "I can tell by your voice that there's something else." Victoria smiled. Sarah knew her too well. "Nothing special. He just seemed like an interesting person." "Interesting?" "Victoria, he's 25. 28. What does his age have to do with anything?" "The fact that you could be his mother." "I can't." "The difference is only 24 years. Sarah laughed. "Are you serious?" "Victoria, I understand that you've been alone for a long time, but getting involved with a young worker." "I'm not getting involved with anyone," Victoria replied sharply. "I just noticed that he's a pleasant conversationalist." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Just be careful, okay?" After they said goodbye, Victoria sat in the darkening living room for a long time. Sarah was right. The age difference was significant, and their social status was radically different. But at the same time, didn't she deserve a little happiness after all these years of loneliness? The next day, David brought the estimate. $22,000 for a complete kitchen renovation and plumbing updates in 2 bathrooms. The price was fair, perhaps even low. "When can you start?" Victoria asked. "On Monday, if that's okay with you." "Perfect." She paused. "Would you mind if I stop by from time to time to check on the progress?" David smiled that smile that made her heart beat faster. "Of course not. It's your house." Monday morning brought the sound of a chainsaw and the smell of fresh wood to the house on Cherry Lane. David started work at 8 o'clock sharp, as promised. Victoria arrived an hour later, pretending to check on the progress, but really just wanting to see him. "Good morning," she said, entering the kitchen through the back door. David was kneeling, dismantling the old cabinets. His white t-shirt clung tightly to his torso, emphasizing his athletic figure. "Oh, hi, Victoria." He stood up, dusting off his hands. "I was just about to call. There's just one problem." Victoria felt a slight disappointment. "What is it?" "When I took down the old cabinets, I found that the wall behind them was damaged by water. Apparently, there was a leak that was simply covered up without fixing the cause." David pointed to the dark spots on the drywall. "We'll have to replace part of the wall and check the pipes behind it." "Does that mean additional costs?" "I'm afraid so." Plus, another 3 or 4 days of work. David looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry I didn't notice this right away. I could have warned you in the estimate." Victoria moved closer, examining the damage, and smelled his cologne mixed with the scent of sweat and wood. So masculine, so different from the expensive perfumes of his business partners. "How much will that add to the total cost?" $1,500, no more. I can do the work at a loss, since I overlooked the problem." "Don't worry about it. An extra $1,500 isn't a problem." David visibly relaxed. "Thank you for your understanding. Not all customers are so loyal when it comes to unexpected expenses." Victoria sat down on a stool and watched him work. "Tell me more about yourself. What are your plans and dreams?" David put down his tool and turned to her. "To be honest, I want to expand my business. I'm working alone now, but I dream of starting a small construction company, hiring a couple of assistants, taking on bigger jobs. What's stopping you?" "Money," he smiled. "To buy the necessary equipment, rent a warehouse, hire people, I need startup capital. Banks are not very willing to give loans to young entrepreneurs without serious collateral. How much do you need?" $50,000 to start with, maybe a little less if I buy used equipment." Victoria nodded. For her, this amount was not critical, but she understood that for David, it represented a fortune. "Do you have a business plan?" "I wrote it myself, but I realize it's not very professional. I never learned how to draw up such documents. Would you like me to take a look? I have experience in business." David's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be great." Over the next few days, Victoria began coming to the house every morning with coffee and pastries from a local bakery. They had breakfast together, discussing the progress of the work, and then Victoria left for the office. In the evening, she would sometimes return when David finished work, and they would study his business plan together. "There's a mistake here," Victoria said on Thursday evening, pointing to the numbers on his laptop. "You haven't accounted for payroll taxes. That will add 20% to your expenses." David sat next to her at the small table he had brought in for his work documents. Their shoulders were almost touching, and Victoria could feel the warmth of his body. "Damn, you're right. How could I have missed that?" "It's easy. When you do something for the first time, you always miss something." Victoria turned to him, and their faces were very close. "That's why you need an experienced mentor." David looked into her eyes, and the air between them became electric. Victoria knew she was on the verge of no return. "Victoria," he said softly, She knew she should pull away, but she couldn't. She had lived too long without intimacy, without touch, without feeling needed by someone other than a business partner. David leaned in and kissed her, gently, uncertainly, giving her the opportunity to pull away. But Victoria didn't pull away. On the contrary, she responded to the kiss with a passion that surprised them both. When they broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. "This is wrong," Victoria said, but she didn't pull away. Why? The age difference, social status, what will people think? Why should we care what people think? David took her hand. "I like you, Victoria. Not as a client or business partner, as a woman." These words melted the last remnants of her resistance. Their romance developed rapidly. Victoria found in David not only a lover, but also a friend with whom she could talk about things she didn't even discuss with Sarah. About the fear of old age, about loneliness, about how difficult it is to be strong when you just want to be a woman. David turned out to be an attentive and tender lover. He admired her intelligence, experience, and elegance. Victoria blossomed under his attention, feeling desired for the first time in many years. But they had to hide their relationship. Bridgewater was a small town where everyone knew everyone else, and scandal could ruin Victoria's reputation. "Maybe we should be open about it," David said one evening. They were lying in bed in her house on Hill Street, in the master bedroom, where she had not been with a man since James's death. "You don't understand what it's like to live in a small town," Victoria replied, stroking his chest. "People will gossip. They'll say that a rich widow bought herself a young lover. Does that bother you? Of course. My reputation is the foundation of my business. If people stop trusting me..." David paused. "I understand. It's just that sometimes I want to be proud of you in public." Victoria kissed him. "Be patient a little longer. Maybe in time." And then the first crack in their relationship appeared. The work on the house on Cherry Lane was finished, but Victoria was in no hurry to put it up for sale. She offered David another project, renovating the bathroom in her own house. It was a small job, more of an excuse to continue seeing each other. "Victoria, can I talk to you?" he asked at the end of the second week of renovations. "Of course. What's the matter?" "I'm having money problems." David looked embarrassed. "The guy who was supposed to pay for last month's work disappeared. He cheated me out of $5,000, and I have a loan for tools, garage rent." Victoria frowned. "How much do you need?" "I don't want to ask you for money. He hesitated. "We're what?" "I don't want you to think I'm dating you for your money." Victoria felt a pang of anxiety, but she pushed the feeling aside. "David, I can see how you look at me. No one can pretend that well." "Then, would $7,000 be enough for now?" $7,000. For Victoria, it was pocket money, but for David, it was a lifeline. She transferred the money to him that same day. "Thank you," he said, hugging her. "I promise I'll pay you back as soon as things settle down. Take your time. The main thing is that you're okay." But 2 weeks later, he asked for money again. This time, it was $3,000 to repair his pickup truck, without which he couldn't work. And a month later, it was $5,000 to buy professional equipment that would help him get bigger orders. Victoria gave him the money without asking any questions, but somewhere deep inside, she began to feel uneasy. Was Sarah right? Was David using her? But when he hugged her in the evenings, whispered sweet nothings, and told her about his plans for the future, her doubts faded away. She needed him, and he needed her. Isn't that how relationships are built? On mutual support? One Saturday, while visiting the Bella Scents perfume shop on Main Street to buy a gift for her business partner in Columbus, Victoria noticed David standing at the display case with women's fragrances. He was talking animatedly with the saleswoman, a young girl with chestnut hair and large brown eyes. "This fragrance is more suitable for special occasions," said the saleswoman, showing him an elegantly shaped bottle. "And this one is for everyday wear." light and fresh. David nodded and bought both bottles. Victoria waited until he left the store before going inside. "Welcome to Bella Scents," the same saleswoman greeted her. Her name tag read, "Emma. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for something elegant, not too sweet," Victoria replied, studying the girl. Emma had a natural beauty that didn't need expensive cosmetics or clothes. She was about 25 or 26 years old and had a special warmth about her. "You have excellent taste," Emma said, showing her several options. "This fragrance is very popular among our older customers. It's sophisticated, but not overpowering older." Victoria grimaced involuntarily. "And the young man who was here before me, does he often buy perfume?" she asked casually. Emma blushed slightly. "David? No, it was his first time in the store. He said he wanted to buy a gift for a special woman. A special woman." Victoria felt a warmth in her chest, so he was buying perfume for her. "He looked familiar," Victoria continued. "Do you know him?" "We met a couple of weeks ago in a cafe," Emma replied, and the blush on her cheeks grew brighter. "He's very nice." Victoria felt something cold squeeze her heart. "Yes, really nice," she agreed, and bought the perfume Emma recommended. That evening, David did indeed give her one of the bottles, the one for special occasions. "Thank you, dear," Victoria said, but she couldn't get the blush on Emma's cheeks when she talked about him out of her head. "Do you like it?" David asked. "The saleswoman said it's a very elegant fragrance." "Very beautiful." Victoria paused. "How do you know this girl, Emma?" David hesitated for a second. "I met her recently at a cafe. She's new in town, moved from Akron. She seemed nice, I see." Victoria decided not to pursue the subject, but a nagging feeling of unease remained. The following week, as she drove past the corner cafe, she saw them sitting together at a table by the window. David was telling her something, gesturing with his hands, and Emma was laughing, covering her mouth with her hand. Victoria parked and watched from her car. They looked natural together, two young people, the same age, without the baggage of the past or social barriers. When they got up to leave, David gallantly helped Emma put on her coat, and there was something intimate and familiar about the gesture. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the scene she had seen in her head. Maybe she was wrong, maybe they were just friends, but her female intuition told her that it was more serious than that. November in Bridgewater was cold and rainy. Victoria sat in her office reviewing documents for a new deal, but her thoughts kept returning to David. Over the past 2 weeks, he had become more distant, calling less often and making excuses not to come to her house. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, coming in with a cup of coffee. "You look tired." "I'm fine. Just a lot of work." Sarah sat down on the edge of the desk. "Victoria, I'm your best friend. Don't lie to me. What's going on?" Victoria put the documents aside. She had wanted to talk to someone for a long time, but was afraid of being judged. "Remember that contractor, David Chase?" "Of course. The one who's interesting to talk to?" Sarah smirked. "Don't tell me you two had something." "We did. For 3 months now." Sarah almost dropped her cup. "Victoria, are you serious? He's a child. He's 28 years old. He's a grown man. A grown man who works with a hammer for hourly wages, and you're a successful businesswoman with a multi-million-dollar fortune. Money isn't everything in life." "Oh my God," Sarah shook her head. "What does he say? Does he love you? Does he want to marry you?" Victoria fell silent. In all the time they had been together, David had never once mentioned love. He had said that he liked her, that he valued her intelligence and experience, that she was special, yes. But the word love had never been uttered between them. "You see," Sarah said, noticing her silence. "Victoria, I don't want to upset you, but think about it. What could possibly bind a young man to a woman 24 years his senior, especially when that woman regularly solves his financial problems? What are you trying to say? Have you been giving him money? Victoria nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. How much? 15, maybe 17,000. My God, Victoria, can't you see what's happening? He's not like that. David is sincere, The phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Victoria glanced at the screen. It was David calling. Hi, she answered, trying to sound normal. Victoria, we need to meet. Talk. Something in his tone alarmed her. When? Tonight, at the house on Cherry Lane, at 7. Okay. Did something happen? I'll tell you when we meet. Sarah looked at her sympathetically. Bad news? I don't know. He wants to meet tonight. Victoria, be prepared for the possibility that he may want to end the relationship. Why do you think that? Because I saw him yesterday in a cafe with that girl from the perfume shop. They were holding hands. Victoria felt the ground slip away from under her feet. Are you sure? Unfortunately, yes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you right away. I didn't know how to bring it up. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Victoria couldn't concentrate on her work, mechanically answering calls and signing documents. The same thoughts kept running through her head. What would David say? Was it really over? And most painful of all, had he been using her from the beginning? At 6:30, she parked near the house on Cherry Lane. David was already waiting, sitting on the porch. He looked nervous, but determined. Hi, he said without getting up. Hi. Victoria sat down next to him on the step. What did you want to talk about? David took a deep breath. Victoria, these 3 months have been wonderful. You're an incredible woman, smart, successful, beautiful. Any man would be lucky to be with you. But Victoria already knew what was coming next. But I met someone. A girl named Emma. Victoria nodded, trying to remain calm. A saleswoman at a perfume store. David looked at her in surprise. How did you know? Bridgewater is a small town. People saw you together. I understand. Listen, I didn't plan for this to happen. It's just that Emma and I are the same age. We have a lot in common. We can make plans for the future without hiding from people. So our relationship was just a temporary diversion for you? No, that's not it. David took her hand. You taught me a lot. Thanks to you, I realized what I want from life. But I don't fit into those plans. Victoria, understand. The difference in age, social status. People will never take our relationship seriously. With Emma, I can have a normal family, children. Every word he said was like a knife to her heart. Victoria understood the logic of his reasoning, but that didn't make it any easier. What about the money I gave you? David blushed. I'll pay you back. Every penny. Just give me some time. When? I asked Emma to marry me. She said yes. We're planning the wedding for spring. Once we're married and have a family, I'll be able to focus on the business and expand it. David, a wedding and a new family cost money. Where will you get it if you're barely making ends meet? David paused, looking at his hands. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About what exactly? I need help. One last time, Victoria laughed, but it sounded bitter. You want me to finance your wedding to another woman? No, not like that. It's just that, you see, our relationship wasn't exactly what you'd call conventional. If people find out we were together, it could damage your reputation. And mine, too. Victoria felt something inside her grow cold. What are you suggesting? I think it would be better for everyone if no one ever found out about what happened between us. I'm willing to forget about the debt, the 17,000, and never tell anyone about our relationship. In exchange for financial assistance for a new start. How much? 150,000. Victoria looked at him in shock. What? I know it's a lot. But think about it. It's a guarantee that your reputation will remain intact. No one will ever know that the respected Mrs. Sterling was dating a worker 24 years her junior. You're blackmailing me. No! I'm just offering a mutually beneficial solution. You get a guarantee of silence, and I get the opportunity to start a new life. Victoria stood up, feeling her legs tremble. What if I refuse? David also stood up, and for the first time since they had met, something hard and calculating appeared in his eyes. Then I'll have to find the money some other way. For example, I could sell the story of our affair to the local newspaper, or write a memoir about how a rich widow bought herself a young lover. I'm sure people would be interested. You do realize that this will ruin your reputation too, right? I don't have a reputation like you do. I have nothing to lose. But you? David shrugged. Sterling Properties, your position in society, the respect of your partners, all of that could disappear overnight. Victoria looked at the man she considered her lover, her friend, maybe even more. And she saw a completely unfamiliar man in front of her, cynical, calculating, ruthless. How long do I have to think about it? Until Friday. That's 4 days, and then I'll start looking for alternative sources of income. Victoria turned and walked to her car. Victoria! David called after her. It's not personal! It's just business! She turned around. You know what, David? For me, it was very personal. And that's your biggest mistake. At home, Victoria poured herself a large glass of wine and sat down in the living room. The house seemed even emptier and colder than usual. She thought about Sarah's words, about how naively she had believed in the sincerity of David's feelings, about what a fool she had been. $150,000. It wasn't a critical amount for her fortune, but David had used her from the very beginning. All these months, he had played the role of a man in love, when in fact, he was planning blackmail. But the worst part was the realization that she had virtually no choice. The scandal would indeed destroy her reputation. Sterling Properties was built not only on professionalism, but also on customer trust. If word got out about her affair with a young worker, about the fact that she was supporting him, many customers would turn away from her. The phone rang. Sarah. How did the meeting go? He's blackmailing me. What? Victoria recounted the conversation in detail. Sarah listened, occasionally gasping. 150,000? How brazen. Victoria, you can't give in to him. This is pure blackmail. What do you suggest? Let him tell the whole town about our relationship? So what? You're a grown woman. You have a right to a private life. Sarah, you understand that it's not that simple. People will gossip. Clients will doubt my professionalism. Then sue him for blackmail. I have no evidence. It's my word against his. Besides, a trial means publicity, and I want to avoid that at all costs. Sarah paused. What if we try to solve the problem in a different way? How? Well, he has no proof of your relationship. No photos, no recordings of conversations. If he tries to say anything, you can deny everything. Say it's the fantasy of an unsuccessful contractor trying to ruin your reputation. What about the bank transfers? $17,000 is a serious amount. Say it was a prepayment for several projects he didn't complete. Victoria thought about it. There was logic in Sarah's words, but something told her that David wasn't as stupid as he seemed. He probably had some kind of proof of their intimacy. You know what? She finally said. Give me until Friday to think about it. Maybe I'll find a way to solve this problem. Okay, but promise me, no matter what happens, don't give him the money. This is just the beginning. If you pay him now, he'll keep coming back. After talking to Sarah, Victoria sat in the darkening living room for a long time. Various solutions to the problem swirled around in her head, but they all seemed either impossible or ineffective. By midnight, she had made a decision. The next day, Victoria drove to Columbus to one of those stores that sell gardening and pest control products. She bought arsenic-based rat poison, a powerful, fast-acting drug. The salesperson didn't even ask for her ID, just warned her about the precautions to take when using it. At home, she hid the box in the basement, behind some old boxes of Christmas decorations. She wasn't sure yet that she would use it, but she wanted to have the option. On Wednesday, David called. "Victoria, how's the decision coming along?" "I'm thinking about it. Time is running out. You have 2 days left." "I remember. Do you want to meet to discuss the details?" Victoria paused. "Friday, 7 o'clock. The house on Cherry Lane." "Great. See you then." On Thursday evening, Victoria sat in her home office in front of her laptop. Her bank account was open on the screen. $1.5 million lay there, the result of many years of hard work and successful investments. $150,000, a tenth of her liquid assets. Money she could spend on anything: travel, charity, business development, but not blackmail. She closed her laptop and went down to the basement. The box of poison was where she had left it. Victoria picked it up and read the instructions. A few grams dissolved in food or drink, and the problem would disappear forever. But could she go through with it? Murder is a serious crime. On the other hand, what else could she do? Pay the blackmailer, and then pay again and again. Victoria went upstairs and poured herself a whiskey. Tomorrow she would meet with David and make a final decision. On Friday evening, November 15th, the sky over Bridgewater was covered with heavy clouds, foreshadowing rain. Victoria parked her silver Lexus near her house on Cherry Lane at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening. In her purse was a small bag of white powder, arsenic, which she had sifted from a box of rat poison. David was already waiting for her in the kitchen, sitting at a small folding table he had used during the renovation. In front of him stood a bottle of cheap red wine and 2 plastic cups, clearly his attempt to create some semblance of a romantic setting for their last meeting. "Hello," he said, standing up. Punctual as always. "Hello, David." Victoria sat down opposite him, placing her purse on the table next to her. "So, let's talk about money." David poured wine into both glasses. "First, let's drink. To old times." Victoria nodded, taking her glass. David raised his, waiting for a toast, but she just took a sip without clinking glasses. "Okay," he said, taking a sip too. "Have you made your decision?" "Yes." Victoria took her checkbook out of her purse. $150,000 as you requested. David's eyes lit up. "Really? I thought you would resist. I thought about what you said. You're right. My reputation is worth more. Smart woman, I've always appreciated that about you." Victoria began to fill out the check, but suddenly stopped. "You know, I want to understand something. Was this all planned from the beginning? The romance? The requests for money?" David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Not exactly. At first I really liked being with you. You're interesting, smart. But then I realized we were too different. And when I met Emma," he shrugged, "sometimes life presents you with choices. I chose my future. And my money will help you build that future." "Victoria, don't be like that. We're both getting what we want. You want peace and quiet, I want a fresh start." Victoria nodded and finished her wine. "Can I have some more?" "Of course." David reached for the bottle. While he was pouring, Victoria quickly emptied the contents of the bag into his glass. The arsenic dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. "Thank you," she said when he placed the full glass in front of her. "For what?" "For the lesson. You taught me a lot about human nature." David raised his glass. "Then let's drink to life lessons." They clinked glasses. Victoria sipped her wine, watching David down half his glass in one gulp. "Now let's get the formalities out of the way," she said, picking up the check again. For the next 10 minutes, they discussed the details: how and when David would receive the money, what guarantees of silence he could give. David finished his glass and poured another. "Are you feeling okay?" Victoria asked, noticing that he was turning pale. "Yes, it's just a little hot in here. David unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. Maybe we should open the window. Sure. When David stood up to open the window, he swayed slightly. Strange. My head is spinning. I guess I drank too fast. Sit down, rest. David returned to the table, but after a few minutes, his condition worsened. He clutched his stomach. Something's wrong. My stomach hurts. Victoria watched him closely. Maybe you ate something bad? I don't know. I feel nauseous. David turned even paler, and sweat appeared on his forehead. 5 minutes later, he began to choke. Victoria, call an ambulance. This is serious. But she didn't move, just sat and watched as the arsenic did its work. David tried to get up, but fell to the floor, writhing in pain. Help me, he wheezed. You chose your future, Victoria said quietly, and I chose mine. David was breathing convulsively, his body shaking with convulsions. 10 minutes later, it was all over. Victoria sat in silence for a few more minutes, staring at the motionless body. Then she got up, carefully wiped her glass with a handkerchief, and put the checkbook in her purse. She left David's glass as it was, with his fingerprints and the remains of the poisoned wine. She left the house through the back door and got into her car a block away. At home, Victoria took a hot shower, burned her clothes in the fireplace, and went to bed after taking a sleeping pill. David Chase's body was discovered on Saturday morning. It was found by Emma Johnson, who came to the house on Cherry Lane, worried that her fiancé had not answered her calls since Friday evening. 911? I need help, she sobbed into the phone. My fiancé is dead. He's lying on the floor and he's not breathing. Paramedics were the first to arrive on the scene, but it was too late to help. David Chase had been dead for at least 10 hours. Detective Mike Harris received the call at 9:30 in the morning. The 45-year-old Bridgewater police veteran had seen it all in his 20 years of service, but sudden deaths of young, healthy people always alarmed him. What do we have? He asked Officer Thompson, who was the first to arrive on the scene. A 28-year-old man, David Chase. His girlfriend found him around 9 in the morning. Judging by the appearance, he died last night. Harris examined the body. David was lying on the kitchen floor, his face contorted in pain. On a small table stood a bottle of wine and 2 plastic cups, one empty, the other with the remains of red wine. Looks like poisoning, the detective muttered. Call the coroner. Where's the girlfriend? In the living room. In shock, Emma Johnson sat in a chair, wrapped in a blanket brought by one of the officers. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands were shaking. Miss Johnson? I'm Detective Harris. I'm very sorry for your loss. Emma nodded without looking up. I need to ask you a few questions. When was the last time you saw Mr. Chase? Yesterday at lunchtime? We met at the cafe. Did he say what he was going to do in the evening? He said he was meeting a client. For work, Emma sniffed. And then he didn't answer his phone. I was worried, so I came here this morning. What kind of client? Did he say the name? No, he just said a work meeting. Harris wrote this down in his notebook. How long had Mr. Chase been working on this house? He finished the renovation a month ago, but he sometimes came by to check that everything was okay. Who owns the house? I'm not sure. Someone from Sterling Properties. I think Sterling Properties. Harris knew the agency. It was the largest in the city. It was owned by Victoria Sterling, the widow of an influential businessman. An hour later, Coroner David Reynolds arrived, an elderly man with 30 years of experience. What do you think, Dave? Harris asked when the coroner had finished his preliminary examination. Looks like poisoning. The symptoms are classic: nausea, convulsions, respiratory arrest, but I can only say for sure after the autopsy. How long will that take? 3 or 4 days for the toxicology tests, but I can give you the preliminary results tomorrow. Harris nodded and returned to the kitchen. He carefully examined the scene. 2 glasses, one with wine residue. If David wasn't drinking alone, where was the second person? And why was one glass clean? The detective carefully packed the glasses into plastic bags, evidence for the lab. He also took the wine bottle for analysis. Around noon, he drove to the Sterling Properties office. Victoria Sterling met him in the reception area, an elegant, middle-aged woman in an expensive suit. "Detective Harris?" Sarah said, "You wanted to talk to me. What's going on?" "Mrs. Sterling, do you own the house at 247 Cherry Lane?" "Yes. Why?" "David Chase's body was found there this morning." Victoria covered her mouth with her hand, feigning shock. "My God, what happened?" "It's unclear at this point. Presumably poisoning." "Miss Johnson said he worked for you?" "Yes, he did some repairs a few months ago. He was a wonderful craftsman, very responsible." Victoria sat down in an armchair. "I can't believe he's dead. He was so young." "When was the last time you saw him?" Victoria pretended to think. "The day before yesterday, I think. Or was it Wednesday? He came by to pick up a tool he left behind after finishing the job." "Did you see him last night?" "No. I was home all evening yesterday watching TV. Can anyone confirm that?" "I'm afraid not. I live alone." Harris wrote down the answers in his notebook. Something about Victoria Sterling's behavior alarmed him. Her reaction to the news of his death was too calm, her answers to his questions too confident. "Mrs. Sterling, what was your relationship with Mr. Chase? Purely business?" "Of course. What else could it be?" "Just clarifying." Sometimes additional relationships develop between an employer and a contractor. Victoria gave him a cold look. "Detective, I am a respectable businesswoman. Mr. Chase was a young worker. What kind of relationship could there be between us other than a business one?" "I see. Well, that's all for now. I may need to talk to you again." "Of course. I'm always happy to assist the justice system." Leaving the office, Harris thought to himself. Victoria Sterling was too ready for his questions, too quick to give an alibi. In his experience, innocent people were usually more nervous, asked counter-questions, demanded details. He was also puzzled by the two glasses in the house. If David drank one, why was there a second glass? And why was one of them clean? Back at the station, the detective began a more detailed study of David Chase's biography. Soon, some interesting facts came to light. "Boss, look," said Officer Jones, who was studying David's bank records. Over the past 3 months, his account has received transfers totaling $17,000. From where? From Victoria Sterling's personal account. Harris raised his eyebrows. 17,000? For what kind of work? According to the records, the transfers were marked repair work and construction services. But the repairs to the house on Cherry Lane cost no more than $20,000 to $25,000. Why such large advance payments? That evening, Harris drove to O'Malley's, a bar on the outskirts of town where local workers and builders gathered. If there were rumors about David Chase in town, this was where he would hear them. "Davy?" "Yeah, I knew the kid," said Tom McCartney, a seasoned carpenter in his 50s. He was a good craftsman, but he was always in need of money. How had he been doing lately? It's strange. 3 months ago, he was complaining that the bank was threatening to take his tools for debts. Then suddenly he got rich. He bought new equipment and dressed better. He said he had received a large order. From whom? He didn't say, but I saw him a couple of times in a cafe with a wealthy woman. She was older, elegant. Do you remember what she looked like? Blonde, around 50. Expensive clothes. I saw her on TV sometimes, advertising some real estate agency, Victoria Sterling. Harris was almost 100% sure. The next morning, the preliminary autopsy results came in. "Arsenic," reported Coroner Reynolds. "A lethal dose. Entered the body through the digestive system, most likely with a drink." How long after ingestion did death occur? At that concentration, 30 to 40 minutes. Harris nodded. Now it was officially a murder case. Monday morning brought Detective Harris new evidence. The results of the fingerprint analysis on the glasses from the house on Cherry Lane showed that the clean glass had only David Chase's fingerprints on it. The glass with the remains of the poisoned wine also had only his fingerprints. Strange, Harris muttered as he studied the report. If someone drank from that glass, where are their fingerprints? Officer Jones looked over his shoulder. Maybe they wiped the glass? Possibly. But why wipe one and leave the other? Harris was pondering this when an agitated woman in her late 30s entered the station. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said to the officer on duty. "I need to speak to the detective investigating the death of David Chase." Harris went out to the reception area. "That's me. How can I help you, Mrs. Mitchell?" "I need to tell you something about Victoria Sterling." They went into the detective's office. Sarah nervously fiddled with the strap of her purse. "I have information that may be important to the investigation." "I'm listening." "Victoria was seeing David Chase. For 3 months. They had an affair." Harris leaned forward. "Are you sure?" "Yes. She told me herself. I was against the relationship, I warned her." "What did you warn her about?" Sarah took a deep breath. "That the young man might use her. And I was right." For the next half hour, Sarah told the detective everything. How the affair began, about the money Victoria gave David, about how he met another girl and wanted to get married. "On Wednesday, Victoria was very upset," Sarah continued. "She said David was blackmailing her. He was demanding $150,000 to keep quiet about their relationship." Blackmailing? In what sense? "He threatened to tell the whole town about their affair if she didn't pay. For Victoria, it would have been a scandal that would have ruined her reputation." Harris wrote down every word. The motive for murder was becoming clearer. What did Victoria say about her plans? Was she going to pay? Sarah paused. "At first I thought so. But then on Thursday, she was acting strange, too calm. She said she would find a way to solve the problem." "A way to solve the problem?" "Yes. And on Friday morning, she didn't come to work at all. She said on the phone that she wasn't feeling well." After Sarah left, the detective began to piece the puzzle together. An affair, money, blackmail, the threat of scandal. Victoria Sterling had a motive, the means, and she had lied about her relationship with the victim. Harris drove to the Bella Scents perfume shop. Emma Johnson stood behind the counter, her eyes red from crying. "Miss Johnson, I need to ask you a few more questions." Emma nodded. "Anything to find David's killer?" "Did David tell you about his clients? Especially Mrs. Sterling?" "Mrs. Sterling?" Emma frowned. "Is that the woman from the real estate agency?" "Yes." "Do you know her?" "She came to the store and bought perfume. It was a strange encounter." "In what way?" Emma recalled. "She asked questions about David. She said she knew him. And then, when I said we were dating, she became kind of cold." "Did David say anything about her?" "Only that she pays well for her work." "But," Emma hesitated. "What?" "Last week he was tense. He said he was having problems with a client. Someone was making things difficult for him in his business." "Did he say who?" "No. He just said it would all be sorted out soon." Harris returned to the station firmly convinced that Victoria Sterling was the killer, but he needed hard evidence. That evening, the results of David's stomach analysis came back. In addition to arsenic, traces of expensive red wine were found, the same brand that had been found in the house. "Good wine," noted the lab technician. "An expensive French brand. A bottle costs $150. Harris checked David's financial records. No purchases of expensive alcohol in the last month, so someone else brought the wine. On Tuesday morning, the detective obtained a search warrant for Victoria Sterling's house. He arrived there with 2 officers at 8 o'clock in the morning. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. I have a search warrant." Victoria studied the document carefully. "May I know what you are looking for?" "Evidence related to the death of David Chase." The search lasted 3 hours. In the basement, Behind boxes of Christmas decorations, Officer Thompson found an empty box of rat poison. "Detective, look at this." Harris examined the box. It was arsenic-based and had been purchased recently. The receipt from a store in Columbus was still inside the box. Date of purchase: Thursday, the day before the murder. "Mrs. Sterling, can you explain why you needed rat poison?" Victoria was taken aback for a second. "I had a rodent problem in the basement." "And you used all the poison?" "Yes, of course." "Strange. Where are the rat corpses?" "Usually after poisoning, they remain in the basement." Victoria did not answer. Several bottles of the same brand of French wine that was found in the house on Cherry Lane were found in the wine cellar at home. "Expensive wine," Harris remarked. "Do you buy it often?" "Sometimes. For special occasions." "And Friday night was a special occasion?" Victoria paled. "I told you I was home." "Mrs. Sterling, I have a witness who saw your Lexus near the house on Cherry Lane on Friday around 7 in the evening." It was a lie. No one had seen Victoria's car. But the detective hoped she would confess. "That's impossible. I also have testimony from your friend Sarah Mitchell about your relationship with the victim." Victoria sank into a chair. "Sarah? What did she tell you?" "Everything. About the affair, the money, the blackmail." There was silence in the living room for several minutes. Then Victoria said quietly, "I want a lawyer." "Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of David Chase. You have the right to remain silent." The trial of Victoria Sterling became the main event in Bridgewater. The local newspaper devoted the front pages to the trial every day. The prosecution presented compelling evidence: motive, blackmail, evidence, rat poison, and expensive wine, and the defendant's lies about the nature of her relationship with the victim. Victoria's lawyer tried to prove that the case was based on circumstantial evidence, but the jury did not believe him. There were too many coincidences. Victoria Sterling was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Sterling Properties went bankrupt 6 months after its owner's arrest. Sarah Mitchell opened her own small agency, but she could never forget how she had betrayed her best friend. Emma Johnson left Bridgewater a month after the trial. Too many painful memories tied her to this town. The house on Cherry Lane remained unsold. Local residents considered it cursed. Children avoided it, telling each other scary stories about the ghost of a young builder. Detective Harris was promoted and transferred to the Columbus Police Department. In a farewell interview with a local newspaper, he said, "The most terrible crimes are not committed by maniacs and robbers. They are committed by ordinary people who believe they have the right to decide who should live and who should die." In a maximum security prison, Victoria Sterling thought every day about the fateful decision she had made on Thursday evening. $150,000 now seemed a paltry sum compared to her lost freedom. But what tormented her most was the question, was her preserved reputation worth a human life? And every day she came to the same answer: no, it wasn't.